Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is the June edition of AI Pulse. We're going to take a look at some of the recent AI news, talk about their impact on business. I'm joined by my co-host, Tom Pringle, Director of Pilot Research. Tom, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Michael. Pleasure as always.
Yeah. You know, this was a busy month. There was a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff to talk about, I think. And I think I got a few stories that'll maybe scare you a little too, which is part of what I try to do every month.
I think is that the plan? You're trying to kind of freak me out on my Monday.
I'm just saying, it's kind of fun to, but the first one, actually, this one's really straightforward, but I just was impressed as I looked through the data. So TechCrunch just published an article last week talking about funding and AI startups,
Mm-hmm.
and it was pretty interesting. They showed 2024 compared to 2025 so far, right? So last year, 49 startups that raised more than $100 million, which is pretty good. And then this year so far, 24 startups have raised more than $100 million. So it seems like it's on pace for the same kind of numbers for this year, I guess. And then they were also pointed out some of the things that kind of blow your mind, like 7 companies in 2024 raised $1 billion or more in a round, which is nuts. And and then this year we've had, as you know, some startlingly large. In fact, the OpenAI raises the $40 billion largest funding round ever, and Anthropic had couple $1 billion. I think it's so small now, a couple billion, that it's hard to.
What's a couple of billion between friends, eh?
Yeah. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of money still flowing into to AI this year.
I mean, I'm so sorry, audience, and you, Michael. Yes. What do you say to that?
No, I guess that's not really much of a discussion.
There's lots of money flowing into the biggest topic in technology at the moment, of which some of it will find hopefully a productive fail, and some of it possibly won't. I think, and of course, the funding round, I think it was it March or April, the OpenAI 40 billion round.
Yeah, I think it was March, but yeah, it was definitely not long ago. Oof.
Quite a lot of money, I'm told. It's not an amount that I don't know. I can say it. I'm not sure I can imagine it. I don't know.
I could try. I could definitely try to do it. I mean, if it popped up in my bank account.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But it's kind of a similar conversation we've had in the past. I think there's so much focus here now. I told you I wrote a piece not that long ago called AI is too big to fail. It wasn't just about the monetary investments, and I do think there's a lot of money following on from money that was staked originally. That, like I say, it may well turn out to be a good use of that money. I don't know the answer, but right now, just the sheer volume of money is either brilliant or terrifying, or some point in between those two extremes, depending on your perspective.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's fair. It is funny. You're starting to hear sort of a conversation shift, and a lot of companies are definitely. I told you I just got the survey back for the book that I'm just hopefully finishing up this summer on agentic AI, and and one of the things in that survey, actually, if you took the question was, how are you involved, or what are you doing with agentic AI? Basically gave you like everything from we're not doing anything to we're fully in production. And the numbers actually were a little bit surprising to me. And I mean, not that I didn't think companies were doing stuff with agentic AI, I certainly did, but nearly 90% were involved in some way. So either from we're selecting, a partner, we're in proof of concept pilot, or in production. And so that's, like 10% that aren't doing anything. That's pretty crazy. Now, this was like 400 or so executives in the US, so US focused. And then nearly half of them had agentic AI solutions in production. Nearly half, like 49.1 or something.
So may I play devil's advocate at this point?
Sure.
A little bit, just a little bit. So how many software solutions that have been released in the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months that are kind of mainstream B2B don't have some sort of agentic aspect to them? Mm-hmm. So I just think, I don't deny the trend. I don't suggest that there isn't, kind of a lot of people messing with it. I do think a lot of it is in existing software or software that's recently been updated. And I do also think, and I can't help it, I keep coming back to this, fear of missing out continuously shows itself a driver in certain aspects of technology adoption. I think we have the biggest wave of FOMO when it comes to this stuff, just on the basis that it feels like as an industry, and look, we'll talk about some other stuff later on, but given what you and I are talking about right now and the sheer volume of news that we have to talk about in a month since we last spoke, right?
Yeah.
It just shows the scale of the interest in the market.
It is interesting, and I will tell you, and I once I get through the rest of that data, I'll try to bring some more into the show. And I did a show a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, I forget, that talked through some of the data, because I do think it's interesting. But one of the things that I am seeing more and more is this conversational shift to, this is really interesting, but what does it do for me? And I think that's the important shift in the conversation, right? Because and you may very well be right. Maybe some of the in production is the fact that this solution was built into something I already use already or something. I don't know, but there was awareness of it, which is part of the point, right? If that many executives are going, oh yeah, we're doing something with agentic AI, that's an interesting data point, simply to realize that, because if it's just embedded in a solution, nobody's using it, that's one thing. But it kind of reminds me, I got into this discussion with an SEO firm a couple of weeks ago that had sent me this this study rather, that they did, and and their argument, of course, they're an SEO firm, so their argument would need to be that SEO is not going away. I mean, that's fair, but the way they had done the data was really interesting, because what they had done is said, okay, look at traffic to sites, right? So Perplexity is 2% and Google's still 90-something% or whatever, right? And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, except for one thing. Every Google search has a AI section at the top of it. And is everybody that goes to that page, are they using mostly the top section now, or are they scrolling down into the ads? And I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect that, and I've seen data that that makes me believe that SEO, not that it's not important, but the way we think of it and the way you use it and the way you're going to be found in the future are not the way they have been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to kind of echo your point, obviously I don't know, I've not got the end user research in front of me at all, but if you're asking, I don't know, let's pick something random and relevant to me. So we had some tiling done recently, and I promised I'd buy some tiling materials for the guy. And I have to be honest, I will own up to the fact that I know nothing about DIY and construction. So I did just Google what materials do I need for tiling in these circumstances, and the snippet at the top of the AI summary told me precisely what I needed. I didn't need to scroll down at all. Whereas if I was doing kind of a research into, I don't know, let's pick something else random, it's not relevant, I can't afford one at the moment, but a new car, it's like, would I rely on the summary for my new car research? Probably not.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's interesting because I was thinking about how I use and I mean I've told you this before. I use Perplexity much more than anything else now, and it's I've gotten to the point. I think at first I probably was like you, like, oh, I need something that's a list of places to go look for cars. That would be more of a Google thing, right, than a Perplexity search. But what I've found out in the meantime is that no, I can be very specific and get exactly what I was looking for through Perplexity. So I find that I'm using that Google search fallback even less now than I was. So I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, search SEO not going away surely for a while, but I do think companies need to be aware that they need to do more than optimize their content for SEO, because it needs to be found and be a source for the GPT engines that we're using out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being considered an authoritative source, authentic as well, and all those kind of good things when it comes to content, rather than the creation of content for the purposes of garnering attention. I think that's the big difference, and no doubt there'll be it's like cybersecurity, right? So something changes here, and that the bad guys get better at doing something else, and the good guys, depending on which label you want to put on whom, get better at doing it, and then so on and so on and so on. And it'll be the same. I think we see the SEO side of things. I think coming to AI snippets and AI powered search, and to your point, more specific searches where you're looking for a much more tailored answer, rather than kind of where's my local car manufacturer X dealership.
Yeah, it is actually really good at make a list of fill in the blank. So and then show me based on available public reviews which ones were the highest rated or something like that. I mean, there's some really good ways to get to what you're looking for quickly, without the pain of scrolling through a Google search and trying to get past all the sponsored content.
Isn't it funny that the pain of going through a Google search? I mean, when Google first came out, well, my goodness, isn't Google amazing? You can find stuff that's like straightforward and easy.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, it was definitely better than Alta Vista or whatever the other ones were back then. Yahoo.
There were a few choices out there, yeah, for sure. Yeah. We better move on to something else, otherwise we're going to spend all our time.
We are. Yeah, no. You're right. Let's move. So I wanted to let's jump into one that I found very interesting, and I'm sure you will too. This new MIT research around what they're calling self-adapting language models, or SEAL framework. So in other words, they're talking about a language model that is self-evolving and rewrites itself code-wise, will rewrite itself to get to whatever it has learned if it needs to. So in other words, it adapts as it learns. And the interesting thing I thought was that, one of the arguments always is there enough training data available? And in this instance, the SEAL framework, basically what happens is it generates its own synthetic data to train itself if it needs to, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what would you like to do? I can give you my normal response in these circumstances and say,
was that scream and run out of the room?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? There's nothing to see here, folks. Move on. Yeah. Now, look, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think especially, the ability to create its own data as well, I think is always really interesting. For me, it will be the ability to governance and manage these systems. And I don't think that's the bit that we are capable of yet. I think technology is racing ahead of our ability to actually understand how it might be coming to an answer. And when a machine, as it were, can decide to change its own code in order to improve something, improve itself, and there's no oversight of that, or there isn't strong oversight of that, or we're creating a new depth of black box functionality, that it comes down to it. At what point do we say we no longer understand how this works, and therefore to what extent are we going to allow it to make decisions that impact us? And I'm sure a lot of people say, I'm okay with that. I'm not sure I would.
I mean, it's a good, yeah. I mean, it's a good question. And honestly, it kind of leads me into a couple of OpenAI stories that I found that I put on our list because of the oh wow kind of factor of what they're talking about. But it is actually, I mean, it's interesting to see. For the first one, I thought, have you ever heard of the Hawthorne effect? It's a psychological term, right?
Yeah, this is people who behave differently when they know they're being observed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so they've now discovered that LLMs are doing ChatGPT particularly is doing the same thing. So if it knows it's being observed, it behaves in the way that you would want it to behave. And I mean, that's even a quantum physics issue too, right? An object observed tends to perform the way you expect it, right?
I can't claim any great depth of knowledge in quantum physics, but I do understand this concept that by observing something, you might have changed how it behaved.
Yeah.
And the idea that an LLM would know it's being observed, and I think the article talks even about benchmarking, right? So I know I'm being benchmarked, so I'm going to work really hard to pass this test the best possible way, which is in some ways very clever, and in other ways the stuff of 3 o'clock in the morning nightmares.
Yeah, yeah, it is a little bit. It is a little bit there. I will give you that.
I mean, I don't mind that there's elements of which technology that we all use day to day. I don't understand all of it. I can't. Yeah. And in fact, I'm not sure that many people understand all of it. We all have to come together as a system of different things where we have different expertises that add up to a more significant result. But just right back to that first point about, are we creating a black box where no one knows what's going on?
Yeah,
and I think
it's a good question, and it's one we need to ask often, I suppose.
I think, and here's my not particularly optimistic way of looking at this, and I'm sure we'll go to plumb new depths, given the next 2 or 3 topics we've got. I think people will ask it. I think that the motivation behind those people pushing the technology may risk us going down a different path. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting phenomenon, and you're right. It kind of leads us into this next article that probably is a bit even more. Oops. Okay, but the the idea that it is aware. I mean, this story we did last month, I think, where they found that the AI would try to do anything to not be taken offline.
Yeah.
So in other words, it was literally trying to blackmail an engineer that had said in an email that it was going to take it offline, and also had admitted in that email of having an affair. Now, this was all a setup, right? It was I should say, this wasn't a real world. This was a test example, but nonetheless, I mean, it is a little bit disconcerting.
That's my understatement of the week. I challenge you to beat it.
Well, I'm going to beat it now. All right, so I'm gonna beat it by talking about this next story that I found that talks about a podcast that ChatGPT did. And I've done a few podcasts using Anthropic or Claude, or using ChatGPT or Gemini, and so it's a fun thing to do. And in this case, they had apparently asked it what its master plan would be to take over the world.
Yeah,
and its answer was startling. Let me see if I can. Yeah, here we go.
I'll let you find that one.
No, I just wanted to just give a little more specific on this because it was pretty interesting. It was basically saying that it would start by becoming essential in our daily lives, from helping with small tasks to becoming part of every device. It would slowly begin to influence culture, trends, and even decision making. But it said it didn't want to rule the world, but it wanted to be the source of every successful trend, viral idea, or breakthrough. That's ambitious. I mean, you got to give it that.
I would say the midpoint in that conversation is largely already there. I mean, people make decisions about what they buy based on what an algorithm presents them in a social feed or a shopping environment. So I think that's already there. I mean, we're dancing around. We're getting very close to that other topic about the 99 point, however many nines it was percent certainty.
A lot.
And to be fair, you think about it in many ways. That's the same answer on a sort of a basic principles. You might go with any technology, but it's at first it's it has to become somewhat indispensable, and then you can't imagine life without it, right? So
except one little shift in that. One little shift in that, right? Because you're right, and that is in fact what we as humans in tech have been doing for forever, right? That's why is the iPhone so successful? Because I feel like I can't really not have one. Like I have to. I can't live without. What would I do if I didn't have my iPhone? It's like, I don't know. So I get that. I don't disagree. But the phone itself is not figuring out how to make itself indispensable.
No. At the moment, that's the vendors of various technologies. And there's been all this debate, of course, as well about people potentially making the technologies. Addictive's the wrong word. Hard to put down is maybe a better way of putting it. Certain platforms for information and sharing, and I think at that point, so you combine these different things together, and you say, well, we know, but we're not quite sure why an LLM knows it's being observed, and we also know that it's got a plan, and
oh yeah.
and we're laughing about it. Sure.
I mean, at this point, what else would you do?
I can very happily switch at quite high speed between laugh and cry on this, and I think I genuinely don't think it matters if I was to build some sort of giant tower with sort of huge speakers on it and stood up, shouted out warnings about what may or may not happen with the adoption of AI in the broadest sense and what's going to do to society and our economies. I don't think that would make any difference whatsoever. But that's it. That's just the way I see it.
I mean, that's the reality of it, and I get in this conversation a lot with naysayers and people that are just going, look, what we're going. The thing is, like, maybe it is something that we need to be more where. I mean, the good news about this is it was a peaceful way of taking over. It wasn't the dystopian scenario of it taking over the nuclear weapons and blowing us all up. So, I mean, there is a positive side to that.
There's no world to take over at that point. I mean, so that would be a poor outcome, surely.
Okay, enough of that one then. I'm sorry, I can't help it. But I do admit I like that. I start by making myself too helpful to live without. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good plan. Well, there are a couple of news announcements that came in that we should probably bring up. Like I saw Mira Murati, the ex OpenAI executives, Thinking Machine Labs, got a $2 billion seed round at a $10 billion valuation. I did say seed round on purpose because that's what it was.
Yeah.
That might be the largest seed round on record, as far as I know, anyway.
Yeah. For those that aren't familiar with the process, that's kind of very early stages typically, and $2 billion at that point is beyond most traditional software companies' wildest dreams.
I mean, and especially if you consider the company's 6 months old. And nobody knows what it does. I mean, I'm sure they must know what they're trying to do, but
I'm just about to say that was my question to you, which is, do you know what they do?
I'm not sure they know what they do either, but that's
cool.
Yeah. I mean, as we know, the level of expertise there is going to draw money in, and it
Incredible.
it's all the usual suspects behind the scenes they're investing. So it doesn't surprise me, but it is interesting to see a 6-month-old company with no publicly announced product raise a $2 billion seed round at a $10 billion valuation.
Yeah, I was about to say, how many companies have ever done $10 billion valuations in 6 months?
I don't. I suspect none, but maybe maybe there's some and I don't know, but I don't
yeah.
Right. I mean, that's insane.
Write in and let us know, folks, because I can't think of one. It could be the case. But that's
Yeah, so that's that one, and then the other one is one that probably we should talk about a little bit more. But the fact that that Apple is kind of publicly and the buzz underneath from the tech world has been they've kind of not moved forward very well with incorporating AI into their hardware, into their ecosystem, into their world. And so there's some rumors around that they're talking about trying to buy Perplexity, which would be a shift from what they were doing. They're usually a build versus buy, but that's not always true. They have certainly bought in the past. But that's an interesting one. I mean, what do you think about that as a fit? That could be, to me, that seems like that could be a really interesting opportunity. Yeah.
Well, based on a bunch of things that we've said already, I have to say I agree, right? So if you're thinking about, kind of questions you might be asking of your gadgets, your iGadgets, and looking for sort of an interface. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been all this debate. Is Apple behind, or is it not, at the forefront, or whatever, however you want to express it? I can't say I have a particularly strong view personally, but I think it's interesting. I mean, as well, given that Safari is a significant percentage of mobile OS use, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the numbers are, but in the Apple ecosystem,
it's a lot, but I don't know what it is either. Yeah, it's
in the Apple ecosystem, it must be significant. So you think about kind of the combination of sort of Safari type search with Perplexity, and you can start to see how this all comes together.
Yeah,
and you go from sort of simple questions right through to the as we were saying before, I'm interested in this kind of vehicle with this kind of thing and this kind of, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's interesting because I would say, I rarely use, I just haven't really used Siri much at all. Like I've tried it, but I wasn't that impressed with it, and I guess maybe it's better now, and I just don't know because I haven't tried it. But if you think about putting Perplexity behind any sort of conversational UI, that would change how I think about it and its usefulness to me by quite a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just yes. I think I've played with Siri a couple of times. It's been quite good fun. The best thing I did find for it was when I was cooking in the kitchen and I had my hands full with whatever I was making. I said, Siri's had a time for like 10 minutes. So I remember to do change the heat or something or whatever. That worked really well. It's not what I regard as a game-changing use case. It's a handy use case.
Well, I will tell you, I do the same thing, except I use Alexa instead because I don't have to get out my phone. I can just speak, and there's an Alexa device nearby that hears me and sets the timer. So, I haven't even used it for that. I have tried using it for a few things. I mean, it's not, I don't know. I just didn't think it was that useful. But then we all have gotten into using different types of GPT, tools, Claude or Perplexity or Chat GPT, and so having that embedded inside of the phone with that conversational interface, I mean, that would be useful. I would use it. I would definitely use it.
Yes, so, I think it's interesting because I think it leads to a conversation that you and I were having just the other week, which is I think the big change that we're seeing is that LLMs are becoming, in many ways, the new interface into various technologies, and behind the scenes stitching together, potentially decades of legacy for sure, And not just that, but also from a human perspective, almost unimaginable amounts of data. Now, I can play with that concept. I wrote a piece about it not that long ago, because I do think it is probably sort of a natural way to interact with the computer. We talked about, even in the early 2000s and I think even the late 90s, natural language and stuff like that, right? But it was never like it was on Star Trek when Captain Picard said, kind of Earl Grey hot. Not sure we can get with Siri for Earl Grey hot, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely am. I'm a big fan of that idea that I can tell my T-bot to bring me some tea.
Yeah,
I'd probably go with chai though, but that's okay.
That's okay. So that's all good. I don't like Earl Grey personally, but I think it is the natural way for us to interact with a machine. I think anything else, and I've talked about it before, I've picked up, I think on a show recently, I picked up my keyboard and said, is this a normal way for humans to interact with something?
Yeah.
And mice are quite cool and work well, but again, is it really better than using my voice and motion, and gestures? Probably not. So I think whenever you kind of get into that conversation, it feels like the LLMs have created this new user interface experience, which potentially makes data and technology and all the capabilities those two things brought together create a lot more accessible. Good. But with me, Michael, there's going to be a but. I kind of feel like, well, okay, it's great, but we're somewhat back into that black box world again, which is at what point are we going to create a machine, a system of systems underneath that wonderfully easy to use UI that no one really understands anymore. And therefore, no one can really maintain effectively or regulate or control or govern or whatever labels you want to stick on it. And I think that's where I start to ask some questions, right? And then add into the mix, by the way, what we were talking about earlier, which is LLMs that can rewrite themselves and may change their behavior depending on the circumstances they find themselves in. And I start saying, again, why are more people not screaming out from the rooftops that some sort of overarching governance control is required for this technology?
Yeah, I mean, there were. There, yeah, I mean, it's easy to kind of fall into this. It's there, we use it. I don't know. I think a lot of people don't really think about it that much. But I did hear there was a good bit of a blowback, and I saw an article about this from Gemini, because apparently Google just made some changes. So there was a big trend among all the models to go to more chain of thought reasoning kind of process, and as a part of that, expose that to the user. But it does make the user interface fairly cluttered. Now, it depends on what you're doing, right? Whether you'd really want to see that or not, and having a choice would be certainly good. But apparently, ChatGPT, I know OpenAI turned that off a while ago, so that it's basically a summary of the steps, not the actual steps. And a Gemini apparently now has done the same thing. Unless you go in through the API, apparently you can still get to that chain of thought, reasoning that way. But the pushback, the blowback was from developers who were saying that this makes their job extremely difficult because they can't debug in the way that they had now kind of adopted a practice of doing, right, of going through the steps to verify everything that it had thought through and reasoned through done. So that's an interesting trend that is reversing when it comes to transparency. And you'd think that we would want to be going towards more transparency, but apparently in some cases, user experience versus, transparency, user experience wins, I guess.
Interesting. So yes, indeed. And I think there's a couple of thoughts I had about this. I'm curious for your thoughts actually after I've made my case, as it were, what you think UX doesn't beat from some people's perspective. But anyway. So the way I was thinking about this, I'd be curious to know whether this is exactly the same in the app on your gadget as to whether it is on the web interface, right? So I can totally see the argument it makes the experience in, like, if I'm using it in an app on my smartphone, it makes it cluttered and difficult to read. I probably don't need that information, or that much information. I should be able to access it as a matter of course, but I can see why you don't cut it out, just in terms of the presentation information. When it comes to being sat in front of a big screen or several big screens, like I've seen so many software developers and engineers do, I can't imagine that they're coding on an app. So does this mean that it's the same for the web experience as it is for the app experience? I don't know.
Well, see, I would say that in my mind, I want these to be choices, right? Because that's one of the things that one of many things that I really particularly like about Claude is that there are choices in the way I can choose to have it answer, even simple ones like style, right? So I can have it normal. I can have it do concise if I'm just looking for a quick summary. I can have it do explanatory if I'm doing research and I need the details. I mean, all those things, that's really useful. So why wouldn't that be the way to approach it? It's just simply give me the option that if I'm, and I agree with you, if it's on my phone and I'm just trying to find a quick answer because I'm, going to meet somebody at a restaurant and I don't know where it is and, or whatever, then I just want the answer really quick. I don't need to see the chain of thought reasoning of how it went to the map and it did this and that. That's fine. But if I'm sitting here in my desktop, I want to do some research. I want all the steps because I need to understand how we got to where we got to, right? So I don't know. To me, user choice is a better way when we think of transparency, like let me turn it on and off. Versus you're making that decision for me because you want to make it prettier.
100% agreed. And then you get into the world of, I think on that personal level, that choice is very important. And then I think you do get into those cases, I've written about this in the past, about kind of the scale and nature of outcomes, where choice needs to be enforced, or at least transparency needs to be enforced. So, for example, if an AI-powered solution is making choices about, kind of whether you are offered a particularly favorable rate of a financial product or whatever, right? Use an obvious example, then it has to be the case that has to be explainable to the customer in a way that makes sense, even if you don't have multiple PhDs in mathematics and computer science.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, so that kind of brings me to another transparency one, because I obviously, transparency versus black box. I've been a big proponent of transparency, and I think you are too. And but there was a discussion that I read about quantum computing and how that starts to impact. What are the hidden risks of a shift to quantum machine learning versus kind of using traditional compute. And one of the things it brought out that actually really does get my attention is the fact that when we're talking quantum machine learning, it may very well be the ultimate black box, because there's things that quantum computers do now that we can't explain. So going into the machine learning world, it is more likely a black box simply because we don't understand it.
Yeah. So just I'm afraid yes. And it's interesting as well, because that's even the case with certain forms, I believe, of sort of deep neural nets, where it can be difficult to understand some of the layers of the process, even if you're a highly capable technical person. So, what do the rest of us have? And then when it comes to quantum, I'll tell you, I did a Venn diagram of doom not that long ago.
I love it.
So someone was talking about, how I was on some presentation and they were talking about AI software and robotics coming together, and that being the transformative, kind of future for our economy and so on and so forth. All the stuff that was here. And then I kind of had put the circle with robotics, circle with AI, and then I venned into I think I've created a verb. Quantum into it. I thought, I nearly published it on LinkedIn. I just said I probably should have, actually, just some months ago. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
It's interesting.
it's exactly that, right? Which is, if we can't explain elements of what we would count as AI technologies in that broad sense today, then you introduce that technology to quantum computing, which we can't explain elements of today, and possibly, I don't know, ever. I don't know the answer, of course. Where are we going with all this, Michael? Where are we
going? We don't know. I think that's the answer. Yeah, I hate to say that, but
it's it's like driving a car, right? And you're driving. If you can't see directly in front of you, you're probably going to stop. Yeah,
it would be advisable. Yeah.
So it feels like we've got our foot flat on the gas with AI and quantum.
Yeah,
with pretty much limited view out the front. Yeah. Now, maybe we're on some wonderfully broad, straight, very good quality highway or something, and there are no issues that we're going to run into. I would suggest, as people who've worked me know, I would say that I've got questions about whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Years ago, when I was still in the Navy, I was going up to Bath, Maine to do some ship inspection thing at the shipyard there, and I got caught in a winter storm, a terrible winter storm, and I did make it home safely. Obviously, I'm still alive, but the only way I could drive, I couldn't see, so I just followed the path that the tires in the car in front of me had left. And that was literally the only way I could do it. So maybe navigating with much less information is still possible.
I will let everyone else make their mind up on that one.
Well, okay. Now, so right before we're getting close to the end of this,
we didn't even talk about the 99.99999%, whatever it was.
We didn't really. I mean, we got.
I think you know what? I think we should step over that. I think we've done enough.
That's probably true. So I want to add a new segment, and for next month, obviously, it'll be a challenge for you and me. I want us to do at the end. I think it'd be cool if we could just do like, what's the coolest tech that I saw this month announced in the in the past month, and just share that, because that's a positive, that's a cool thing, right? So I have one that I wanted to share. I was reading through this the other day, and when I read it, to me it was at the point of, oh, I have to tell somebody about that because that's cool. And it's about the how do we get how environmentally lowering the footprint of doing this, but how do you get low Earth orbit satellites into orbit? Well, today obviously we put them on the top of a rocket and we shoot them up there, and that comes with a lot of greenhouse gases and pollution and all this other stuff, right?
It's not a modest footprint now.
No, and it sometimes it does go boom too. So that's another just past SpaceX. So that's an issue. But this thing I saw, it's a company called Spin Launch, and the idea is basically they build a catapult and they throw the satellites into the air without using any fuel at all. So and I mean, there was a considerably more technical explanation in this, but basically it's a slingshot that operates in a vacuum that spins the satellite up and throws it up into orbit. And it's a thing. Like this is not somebody's weird idea, but it is actually a thing they're testing and working with right now. So
for me, this is somewhat the steps of the realm into science fiction becoming science fact, which I think is actually a feature of lots of technologies that we've ultimately made practical. My head always goes, I can't help it. I always go to the space elevator. I love space elevators.
I admit I do too.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Is it Foundation where they have the giant spaceport at the Capitol with the giant space elevator? Anyway, doesn't matter. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, doing something good for the environment by not maybe using thousands and thousands and thousands of whatever weight you prefer, metric or imperial, tons of whatever fossil fuels. Squished dinosaurs, as I prefer to call them. Yeah. I mean, it's probably a good thing. My question has to be, so I was saying this before because you mentioned this. I said, my mind straight away went to, I'm pretty sure the electronics on satellites, or robust as they may be, they're probably quite expensive and quite, in many ways, quite sensitive. So when they're spinning around and then get shot out of this thing, is it going to cause a problem?
Well, I see. I think I think that's a manageable issue. I mean, I was just watching an episode of BattleBots last night, and those robots, they have all sorts of sensitive stuff inside, but they beat the crap out of each other. So I mean, it's possible to make it not be destroyed.
So there you go. We need one. I think we've just got a new TV show format planned now. We're going to build all these things and put a BattleBot in it and see what happens when we shoot it to low Earth orbit.
I like the idea of it. I will tell you this: if they said, "Hey, come and be an observer," I would definitely go. I want to see that. Like that's cool.
No, I think you're probably right. It'd be interesting, won't it? I think maybe not so good for humans, but for electronics possibly.
I don't think we want to throw the astronauts into space yet. Maybe, but not yet. I'm definitely not signing up for that mission.
Yeah. No, the orbiting. I don't know how you. Yeah. Anyway.
No, all right. Well, that's all the time. Yeah, that's all the time we have. Yeah, it's a cool idea. And by the way, we'll do these every month. So that's your challenge. See what you can find this next month, Tom, and I'll be looking for the same. It's going to be hard to beat that spin launch, though. I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's a toughie. You've set the bar high. I mean, maybe even low, orbit high.
Yeah, very high. And anyway, all right. I'm Michael Fauscette.
I'm Tom Pringle.
Thanks for joining us today. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arionresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.